The calm before the storm. The Serenity floated quietly in the vastness of space, its white hull gleaming under the distant light of the stars. Inside, the ship was a sanctuary for those who had nowhere else to turn. Wounded soldiers, refugees from countless battles, and those seeking care from every corner of the galaxy filled its hallways. It was a place of healing, a peaceful ship meant to bring comfort, not combat. Captain Sarah Reynolds stood by the viewport, gazing out at the endless stars. She had been at the helm of the Serenity for nearly 2 years, and every day had been a reminder of why they were here. Earth's hospital ships were known for their dedication to saving lives, no matter the race, the species, or the side of the conflict. There were no judgments, only care. The Serenity was Earth's greatest symbol of compassion in a galaxy torn by war. The crew worked silently, tending to the patients, cleaning the medical bays, and performing routine checks on the ship's systems. Everything was peaceful, calm, too calm. Suddenly, the soft hum of the ship's engines was interrupted by a strange blip on the radar. Captain Reynolds turned from the window, her instincts instantly alert. She approached the navigation console, her fingers quickly flying over the controls as she examined the unfamiliar signal. The screen showed a cluster of ships rapidly approaching their location, but it didn't seem like anything she had encountered before. "Captain, we're picking up an unknown fleet on the scanner," Lieutenant Marcos said, his voice tense as he stood next to her, watching the radar screen. "It's coming in fast. No identification codes." Reynolds narrowed her eyes, her mind racing. The Serenity was deep in neutral space, far from any conflicts. It wasn't unusual to see passing ships, but the speed and suddenness of the approaching fleet were unsettling. And the lack of any communication, it didn't sit right with her. "Have they attempted to make contact?" Reynolds asked, her voice steady but firm. "No, Captain," Lieutenant Marcos replied. "There's no response to our hails." Reynolds hesitated for a moment. The peaceful nature of their mission made it difficult to fathom that anyone would want to attack a hospital ship. But this was the galaxy, and anything could happen. She had learned that the hard way. "Prepare the crew for potential threats," she ordered. "Activate the defense systems, but do not engage unless provoked." Marcos nodded and relayed the orders, while Reynolds walked toward the ship's command center. Her mind was already formulating a plan. They could not afford to make enemies, not in a space where they had no allies. The Serenity was built for healing, not for war. But she was a captain, and her first duty was to protect her crew and patients. She couldn't let her guard down, no matter how peaceful their mission was. As the seconds ticked by, the ship's sensors began to pick up more information about the approaching fleet. There were 5 ships in total, large and heavily armored, with weapons that could easily overpower the Serenity. Reynolds' heart raced. She knew the crew could fight back if needed, but they weren't prepared for a full-scale battle. This was a hospital ship, not a warship. The only weapons it carried were for self-defense, not for an all-out assault. "Captain, the fleet is changing course," Marcos reported. "They're heading straight for us." Reynolds turned sharply, her eyes narrowing. The ships weren't just passing by. They were coming for them. Her mind flashed to the countless scenarios she had prepared for over the years, but this wasn't one of them. This wasn't a battle for resources, or territory, or even revenge. This was something else. "Captain," Marcos said again, his voice tight with worry. "They're locking onto us. They've armed their weapons." It was happening. Without warning, the peaceful calm of space was shattered as the first missile fired. The sound of it echoed through the hull of the Serenity, and the ship rocked as the defensive shields activated in an instant. Reynolds' pulse quickened, but her expression remained calm. She had to stay in control. They hadn't fired on them yet. There was still time to find out who these attackers were and why they had come. She turned to her crew, her voice steady despite the chaos unfolding around them. "Prepare for evasive maneuvers," she ordered. "Set course for the nearest neutral station. We'll try to outrun them." The crew sprang into action, But Reynolds knew it was only a matter of time before the unknown fleet would catch up. She couldn't shake the feeling that this attack was more than just an act of aggression. There was something personal about it. She didn't know who they were, but she could feel the weight of their intentions. The calm before the storm was over, and the Serenity was caught in the eye of a galaxy-wide conflict. Reynolds stood tall, gripping the edge of the console as the ship lurched again from another blast. She wasn't just going to sit and wait for their fate. Earth had taught her how to fight, how to survive. She would fight for the lives aboard her ship, for the patience, for the crew. She would fight, not with weapons of destruction, but with everything else Earth had taught her. Hope, determination, compassion. And that was when she knew. This was just the beginning. The moment the Serenity shuddered under the impact of the first missile, Captain Reynolds knew their peaceful mission was over. The attackers weren't just testing the waters. They were determined to destroy them. The crew scrambled to their stations, and the once calm and orderly ship now felt like a battlefield. Reynolds quickly regained her composure. She had no time to be shaken by the unexpected assault. Earth's hospital ships were known for their resolve, and she wasn't about to let this attack define them. But the attackers had made one grave mistake. They had underestimated Earth's resolve, especially when it came to defending its own. Shields holding, Lieutenant Marcos reported, his voice tense as the crew worked frantically to stabilize the ship. But they've locked onto our engines. They're going for the heart of the ship. The Serenity was a marvel of Earth engineering, designed to withstand hostile environments and protect the innocent. But it wasn't a warship. It wasn't built for direct combat. Still, its defensive systems were top of the line, and it had one advantage: speed. Initiate evasive maneuvers, Reynolds ordered, her tone sharp and commanding. Full power to the engines. Let's show them we won't go down without a fight. Marcos worked quickly, his hands flying over the console, redirecting power and executing complex maneuvers that would have been impossible for most ships. The Serenity darted and weaved through the vacuum of space, evading missile after missile as they narrowly missed their target. But Reynolds could feel the tension growing with each near miss. They were running out of time. The ship's defensive shields flickered under the constant barrage, and she could hear the faint hum of the hull groaning as it absorbed the damage. But they were still alive. For now. Captain, there's no way we can outrun them with this kind of firepower, said Lieutenant Roberts, her voice shaking as she analyzed the incoming data. They've got us cornered. Reynolds' mind raced. The attackers were closing in on them fast, and their weapons were more than a match for the Serenity's defenses. They had no hope of outrunning them, no hope of outgunning them. The only chance they had was to find a way to turn the tables before it was too late. We can't keep running forever, Reynolds said, her voice low and determined. We need to make them believe we're not the easy target they think we are. I want you to prepare for countermeasures. Focus on misdirecting their targeting systems. Roberts hesitated, glancing at the captain. You want us to fight back? Reynolds met her gaze, her expression unwavering. I want us to survive. The tension was thick in the command center. The Serenity was a symbol of peace, but in this moment, it was a ship caught in the heart of a war. They couldn't fight for long, but they didn't need to. All they needed was to survive long enough to get a message out, long enough to signal help. Prepare the communication systems, Reynolds said, her mind already working on their next steps. I want a distress signal sent to the nearest neutral station, now. As the crew worked in overdrive, Reynolds stood tall at the helm, watching as the enemy ships continued their relentless pursuit. Each passing second brought them closer to destruction, but she wouldn't let fear control her. She had trained for moments like this, moments when everything seemed lost. She wouldn't give up on her crew or the patients depending on her. And then it happened. Another missile, this one aimed directly at the engine room. The Serenity shuddered violently as the blast collided with the hull, and alarms blared throughout the ship. The power flickered, and for a moment, everything went dark. Captain, Marcos shouted, his voice filled with panic. The engine room's been hit. We're losing power. Reynolds' heart raced as she quickly assessed the damage. They were slowing down, and the attackers were gaining ground. But in that moment, her mind clicked into overdrive. The hospital ship may not have been designed for war, but Earth had taught its people how to fight against overwhelming odds, and that was exactly what they were about to do. "We're not done yet," Reynolds muttered under her breath, more to herself than anyone else. "Get me a status on the backup generators." Marcos and Roberts worked swiftly, rerouting power through the backup systems. It wasn't perfect, but it was enough to keep the ship moving, just enough to survive a little longer. The Serenity wasn't done yet, and neither was its crew. "Captain," Roberts said, her voice now steady with determination, "the distress signal's been sent. It'll take time, but help is on the way." Reynolds nodded, relieved. They had done everything they could to call for help. Now, it was up to the Galaxy to decide if they would come in time to save them. For now, their best chance was to keep the Serenity moving, keep the enemy guessing. The moment of retaliation was coming, and when it did, the attackers would find out that Earth wasn't as defenseless as they had thought. The calm had ended, and the storm had begun. The only question left was, would they survive long enough to see it through? The Serenity was not built for battle. It was designed to bring aid, heal the wounded, and provide refuge. But as Captain Reynolds gripped the command chair, she realized something that had never crossed her mind before. The ship wasn't just a vessel, it was a symbol. It represented everything Earth stood for. And it was about to show the Galaxy that no one should underestimate humanity's resolve. The constant barrage from the attackers was relentless. Each impact sent shockwaves through the ship, rattling the crew, but not breaking their spirit. Reynolds could see it in their eyes. Fear, yes, but also determination. They wouldn't let this ship, their symbol of peace, fall so easily. Not while they still had breath in their lungs. "Reynolds, the enemy fleet is gaining on us." Lieutenant Marcos yelled from his station, sweat beading on his forehead as his fingers flew across the control panel. "We're at a disadvantage. They've got superior firepower. We're not going to outrun them," Reynolds responded, her voice firm. "We need to make them hesitate." For a moment, silence fell over the command center. The tension palpable as everyone looked to the captain for guidance. The Serenity was limping now, its engines barely holding up, but Reynolds refused to let it fall. She wasn't about to allow the Galaxy to think Earth was helpless. "Prepare the countermeasures," she said with a calm that didn't match the chaos outside. "We have one shot at this." The crew moved quickly, following the captain's orders with precision. The countermeasures weren't designed to destroy the enemy ships. They were designed to confuse them, to make them question their certainty, and to create the smallest window for Earth to fight back. Initiating defensive protocols, Marcos reported, his voice tense but steady. "Deploying decoys in 3, 2, 1. The Serenity unleashed a barrage of electronic countermeasures, flooding space around them with false signatures, ghost ships, false signals, and holographic distractions. It wasn't much, but it was enough to throw the attackers off course, even for a brief moment. The enemy fleet paused, their targeting systems momentarily confused as they tried to differentiate between real targets and decoys. It was just a few seconds, but it was the opening the crew of the Serenity needed. The ship may not have been designed for combat, but Earth had learned to adapt. And in that adaptation, they'd found their strength. Now, Reynolds barked, her eyes sharp as the decoys did their job. "Return fire." The crew acted quickly, tapping into the ship's limited weapons systems. They were not armed for a full-scale battle, but the Serenity was equipped with defense lasers. It wasn't much, but it was enough to send a message. The first blast hit the closest enemy ship, its shields flickering before the laser tore through them. The attackers were caught off guard. The Serenity had fired back. The Galaxy, who had written them off as helpless, now had to reconsider their assumptions. "Direct hit," Lieutenant Roberts shouted, her voice full of surprise. "Captain, We've damaged their shields. They're regrouping. The attackers, stunned by the Serenity's unexpected defense, began to retreat, momentarily reassessing their strategy. The crew wasn't certain if the attackers were merely regrouping or if they were afraid of the humans' resilience. Regardless, it was a victory, albeit small, against an overwhelming force. But Reynolds knew that this moment of relief wouldn't last long. The enemy was regrouping, and they would come back with more intensity. It was only a matter of time before they launched another assault. "We've bought ourselves some time," Reynolds said, her voice steady as ever. "But we can't waste it. Get me a status on our comms. Are we still in contact with the neutral station?" "We're still transmitting, but it'll take time for them to receive the message," Roberts answered. "We've done all we can. Help will come. We just have to hold out long enough." Reynolds nodded, her eyes scanning the ship's damaged systems. The crew had done well, but the Serenity was still vulnerable. Every second they could buy was a second closer to help arriving. But she knew something else too. Earth's fleet might not have been as big or as powerful as the one hunting them, but it was something far more dangerous: human ingenuity and unbreakable will. "We'll hold out," Reynolds said, her voice steady despite the odds. "We've faced worse and survived, and we'll show the galaxy just what Earth can do when it fights back." As the enemy began to regroup, the Serenity drifted through the vastness of space, battered but unbroken. The attackers, once confident in their superiority, now found themselves unsure of their prey. The galaxy was watching, and Earth was showing them that no matter how impossible the odds, they would always find a way to fight back. Reynolds wasn't going to let her crew die without a fight. And with each passing moment, she felt more certain that Earth's strength would prevail, no matter what came next. As the Serenity drifted through the cold expanse of space, the crew knew it was only a matter of time before the enemy would strike again. The brief victory from the countermeasures had given them a glimmer of hope, but Reynolds knew this hope was fragile. The enemy was relentless, and their retreat was only temporary. They would return, and this time, Earth's ship would have no decoys left. "Captain, we've lost power to several vital systems," Lieutenant Marcos called from his station, his voice tense. "We need to make repairs, or we won't survive another attack." Reynolds nodded, her eyes narrowing as she stared at the damaged screens before her. The ship was far from what it once was. Scorched panels, flickering lights, and the low hum of emergency systems filled the room. But it was still intact. For now, and as long as it was, they still had a chance. "Focus on life support and shields," Reynolds ordered. "We need to be ready for their next move. Get all hands on deck." The crew sprang into action, each person taking their assigned task with a sense of urgency. There was no room for hesitation. Every second was precious, but Reynolds knew this was more than just a fight for survival. It was a chance to prove humanity's strength to the galaxy, to show that Earth's will could not be easily broken. "We need to send out a distress signal again," Reynolds said, turning to Roberts, who was working on the comm systems. "We're running out of time." "I'm on it," Roberts replied, her fingers flying across the console. "It'll take a few minutes to send the message. The enemy may have disabled some of our communication systems, but we can still get the signal out." As Roberts worked, Reynolds took a moment to think. Earth's ship, the Serenity, wasn't supposed to be here. It wasn't supposed to be in the middle of a galactic war. It wasn't designed for combat, but that didn't matter anymore. Earth's crew had proven that they could make do with what they had. Now, they would need to do it again. "Status report, Lieutenant Marcos," Reynolds called out, breaking her thoughts. "Can we hold out long enough for reinforcements?" "We can," Marcos said after a brief pause, his voice more confident now. "The ship's holding together, but it's not pretty. The shields are holding, but I can't guarantee how long they'll last if we take another direct hit." Reynolds' gaze was unwavering as she met the lieutenant's eyes. "Then we fight until we can't fight anymore." The decision was made. The Serenity would not retreat. It would stand its ground and show the galaxy that humanity would not be silenced. Suddenly, the ship shook violently as another blast hit. The lights flickered, and the sound of alarms blared through the ship. The enemy had returned, faster than expected. Their ships filled the view screens, massive and intimidating, their weapons charged and ready for another attack. "Brace for impact," Reynolds shouted, her voice commanding. The crew secured themselves as the ship shuddered under the force of the incoming fire. The Serenity held firm, but just barely. The energy shields flared brightly as they absorbed the incoming shots, but the strain was evident. The hull groaned, and the ship's systems began to fail in places. "Captain," Lieutenant Roberts screamed from her station, "we're losing power. The shields won't hold much longer." Reynolds' mind raced. There was no time left. The enemy fleet was closing in, and they had only seconds to act. But then something unexpected happened. The Serenity's damaged comm system suddenly flickered to life. "Captain, we've received a signal from the neutral station," Roberts shouted, her voice laced with disbelief. "It's not a distress call, but a direct order from Earth's fleet." Reynolds' heart skipped a beat. Could it be? Was help finally on its way? "Patch it through," she ordered, her voice filled with hope. The screen in front of her flickered, and a stern voice crackled through the speakers. It was Admiral Harris, commander of Earth's fleet. "Captain Reynolds, this is Admiral Harris," the voice said. "We've received your signal. We're en route to your location, but there's a twist. We've detected something on their ships, something they didn't count on. We're sending reinforcements, but you need to hold them off just a little longer. Earth's fleet has weapons the enemy has never seen before." Reynolds' mind raced. Earth's fleet was coming. The cavalry was on the way, but it was still up to them to buy enough time for the reinforcements to arrive. "Understood, Admiral," she said firmly, her resolve stronger than ever. "We'll hold out as long as we can." The message ended, leaving the crew with a sense of renewed purpose. Reynolds turned to Marcos and Roberts, her eyes steady. "Prepare for their final assault. We're not letting Earth's fleet down." Just as the enemy ships began to close in, the Serenity fired back with everything it had left. The laser cannons hummed as they fired in rapid succession, striking the enemy ships with deadly precision. The attackers hesitated, shocked by the sudden onslaught. They had underestimated the humans again. The enemy tried to retaliate, but Earth's ship was different. The Serenity fought with desperation, with the fury of a species determined to survive. Reynolds could feel the tide beginning to turn. The enemy, once so confident, was now unsure. And just when it seemed the battle would reach its peak, a flash of light lit up the dark void of space. Earth's fleet appeared, massive and powerful. Their ships were armed with weapons of unimaginable power, laser cannons that could cut through entire fleets in seconds. The reinforcements had arrived. The battle had only just begun, but one thing was certain. Earth had made its mark on the galaxy. And now, the enemy would know better than to underestimate the strength of humanity. The reinforcements from Earth arrived in a dazzling display of power, their ships tearing through the black expanse of space with precision and authority. Each vessel was a monument to human engineering, sleek and efficient, their hulls reinforced with technology the enemy had never seen. And now, they were here. Captain Reynolds stood at the helm of the Serenity, her eyes locked on the view screen. The sight of Earth's fleet charging toward the enemy was enough to send a surge of adrenaline through her veins. This was the moment they had been waiting for, but the battle was far from over. "Admiral Harris' fleet is here," Lieutenant Marcos reported, his voice filled with relief. "Their firepower is incredible. The enemy didn't expect this." Reynolds nodded, but she knew it wasn't over yet. The enemy had grown too bold, too confident in their power. The Serenity had given them a taste of what humanity could do, but now Earth's fleet was going to show them the true strength of human resilience. "Prepare to engage," Reynolds ordered, her voice steady but determined. "We've bought enough time. Now it's time to make sure they regret their decision to attack us. The enemy fleet, now surrounded by Earth's powerful ships, scrambled to regroup. Their once organized formations began to break apart, the fear of facing Earth's unexpected might taking hold. But they weren't ready to give up just yet. They fired their weapons, unleashing a barrage of energy blasts toward the incoming fleet. For a moment, the dark vacuum of space was filled with a blinding light as the two sides clashed. The Serenity, though battered and bruised, fired its remaining weapons, striking back with renewed strength. Earth's reinforcements were relentless. Their energy shields absorbed the enemy's fire, only to retaliate with an overwhelming surge of power. The enemy's ships were no match for the advanced weaponry Earth had at its disposal. The first few ships crumpled under the assault, their hulls exploding into fiery fragments as Earth's lasers tore through them like paper. Reynolds watched the destruction unfold before her eyes, but she didn't allow herself to feel satisfaction. Not yet. There were still many enemies left, and they would stop at nothing to win. Direct hit on their command ship, Lieutenant Roberts called out from her station. "It's losing power. They're retreating." Reynolds' heart skipped a beat. The command ship was the leader of their fleet, and taking it down would be a crippling blow to their forces. Earth's fleet had done it. The first wave of enemies was crumbling. But Reynolds knew better than to celebrate prematurely. The enemy had been underestimated before, and they might have a few surprises left up their sleeves. "Stay alert," Reynolds commanded. "They'll try to regroup. Prepare for their counterattack." As expected, the remaining ships began to fall back, forming new battle lines. They weren't about to let Earth's fleet make a mockery of them. The enemy had suffered severe losses, but they were far from defeated. Suddenly, an unexpected signal came through. It wasn't a direct communication, but a transmission that reverberated across every frequency, loud and clear. It was from the enemy's high command, a message broadcasted for all to hear. "Humans," the voice said, distorted but unmistakable. "You may have won today, but know this: we will return. This war is far from over." The voice crackled, and then the message cut off. Reynolds stood in stunned silence for a moment, the weight of the message sinking in. The enemy was vowing to return, to fight again. But she wasn't worried. They had come to Earth's doorstep thinking it would be an easy target. They had underestimated humanity's will, its ability to adapt and survive. The Earth fleet had proven its strength, its determination to defend its own. The Serenity had been their beacon, their signal to the galaxy that Earth would not be easily subdued. And now, with Earth's fleet backing them up, they had made a statement the universe wouldn't soon forget. "Admiral Harris," Reynolds said, her voice resolute as she spoke into the comm system. "Tell your fleet we've bought humanity the time it needs. Now let's finish this. We've got a message to send." As the Earth fleet advanced, their weapons lighting up the dark void of space once more, Reynolds allowed herself a moment of reflection. The enemy had dared to strike humanity, to attack their hospital ship, but they had underestimated not just Earth's firepower, but the unyielding resolve of its people. The battle wasn't over, but one thing was certain: Earth would never back down, and the universe would now learn to fear humanity's wrath. The final confrontation had begun. The battlefield was a chaotic symphony of destruction. Explosions rocked the void of space as the two fleets clashed with a ferocity that could only be born out of desperation. Earth's forces, with their newly arrived reinforcements, had launched an unrelenting assault, their weapons blazing in the cold emptiness of space. The enemy, once confident in their superiority, now found themselves struggling to hold their ground against humanity's fury. Captain Reynolds watched the scenes unfold on the massive view screen. The enemy fleet had been broken into smaller pockets, their ships struggling to regroup in the face of Earth's overwhelming firepower. But the war was far from over. The enemy was not a foe to be underestimated, and Earth's fleet, though victorious in their first skirmishes, had paid a heavy price. "Report," Reynolds said, her voice unwavering despite the storm of emotions churning inside her. "Admiral Harris' fleet has secured the left flank." Lieutenant Roberts responded quickly. "But we've suffered casualties. The Andromeda took a direct hit, and their shields are down." Reynolds' heart tightened. The Andromeda was one of the flagship ships, known for its formidable firepower and advanced technology. Losing it was a blow, but there was no time for regrets now. They had to press on. "Keep the pressure on," she ordered, her eyes narrowing in determination. "We can't let them escape. We're pushing them back, and we need to finish it." The enemy, sensing the tide turning, began to retreat. Their ships scattered in every direction, attempting to escape the wrath of Earth's fleet. But they didn't understand Earth's tenacity. Humanity wasn't simply going to let them run. The battle was far from won, but the momentum had shifted in Earth's favor. The tables had turned, and now it was time for the enemy to pay the price for their recklessness. "Enemy ships are attempting to regroup near the asteroid field," Lieutenant Marcos said, his voice laced with urgency. "They're trying to hide in the debris. Should we follow them?" Reynolds knew what needed to be done. The asteroid field was a perfect hiding spot, but it also provided a perfect trap. If they were careful, they could flush the enemy out and finish them off once and for all. "Set course for the asteroid field," Reynolds commanded. "We'll corner them there. No more escape." The Serenity surged forward, cutting through the darkness with deadly intent. As they approached the asteroid field, Reynolds' eyes stayed fixed on the view screen. The debris scattered in all directions as the two fleets neared, their weapons ready to strike at any moment. The enemy, realizing they were being pursued into the trap, began to launch desperate counterattacks. Their weapons lit up the void, aiming for Earth's ships, but the precision of Earth's fleet was unmatched. The Serenity dodged expertly, its agility a testament to the superior design of human vessels. One by one, Earth's ships fired their weapons, striking down the enemy's flanking forces with ruthless efficiency. The asteroid field became a battleground, and the enemy was overwhelmed. Their ships, no longer able to regroup or flee, fell apart under the concentrated assault of Earth's forces. Reynolds clenched her fists, her focus unbroken. She knew the enemy wouldn't give up easily. They would fight until the very end. But Earth had proven itself. It wasn't just about the ships or the weapons. It was about humanity's spirit, its resolve to protect its own. And that was something the enemy could never understand. "Commander, the enemy's flagship is still holding out," Lieutenant Roberts said. "It's positioned near the center of the asteroid field. They're trying to make a stand." Reynolds' eyes flicked to the view screen. The enemy's flagship, though damaged, was still operational. It was a symbol of their defiance, but it was also a weakness. It was time to end this. "All units, concentrate fire on the enemy flagship," Reynolds commanded. "We end this now." The fleet responded in unison. Their weapons lit up the void of space, directing everything they had at the enemy's flagship. The first few shots hit, shaking the enemy vessel as it tried to retaliate. But the damage was already done. Earth's fleet had the upper hand. The enemy flagship, unable to withstand the concentrated fire, began to crumble. Its shields flickered and failed, and the hull was torn apart as the final blows struck. There was no escape. The enemy had underestimated Earth's fleet, and now they would pay the ultimate price. As the flagship was reduced to nothing but debris, Reynolds exhaled slowly. The enemy was finished. They had fought for their survival, but in the end, Earth's fleet had proved that humanity was not to be underestimated. "Victory is ours," Reynolds said softly, though the weight of the battle still hung heavy in the air. "But let's not forget, we did not win just because of our ships or our technology. We won because we fought with everything we had. And that's something no enemy can ever take from us." The battle was over, but the war was far from finished. The enemy might return someday, but Earth would be ready. And the universe would know that humanity would never back down. The wrath of Earth had been unleashed, and there would be no mercy. The debris of the battlefield floated in space like a grim reminder of the chaos that had unfolded. The once pristine expanse was now littered with wreckage from the battle, the shattered remnants of enemy ships drifting aimlessly. The victory had come at a high cost, but Earth had emerged triumphant. The enemy fleet, once a formidable force, was now reduced to nothing more than pieces of twisted metal and burnt-out husks. Captain Reynolds stood at the command deck of the Serenity, her eyes scanning the view screen, still taking in the full extent of the destruction. The sounds of the crew working in the background were a dull hum, but in her mind, the silence was deafening. This was a victory, yes, but it was a victory that carried the weight of the lives lost on both sides. "Damage report," Reynolds ordered, her voice steady, but filled with the gravity of the situation. "Minimal casualties on our side, Captain," Lieutenant Roberts replied, his face tense with concern. "Most of our ships are still operational. The Andromeda and Aurora both sustained heavy damage, but nothing irreparable. Our medical ships are dealing with the wounded." Reynolds nodded, her mind already focused on what needed to be done next. There was no time for celebration. Earth had won this battle, but the war was far from over. The enemy was not one to be easily deterred. But for now, they had been dealt a devastating blow, and Reynolds knew that would make any future conflicts much more complicated for them. "Good. Keep monitoring the fleet and ensure all injured are taken care of," she said, her gaze moving to the vast void of space. "I want every ship at full readiness. We don't know what the enemy will do next." As Reynolds surveyed the battlefield, Lieutenant Marcos approached, his voice calm but serious. "Captain, we've received a transmission from the Galactic Council. They want to speak with you." The Galactic Council, the very organization that had laughed at Earth's attempts to defend itself. The same body that had dismissed humanity as a mere blip in the galaxy, unworthy of consideration. Reynolds's fists tightened at the thought of them, but she knew the time had come to address them. "Put them through," she said, her voice unwavering. The screen flickered before an image of a tall alien appeared. It was one of the Council's high-ranking members, a figure who had been part of the collective that had once scorned Earth's efforts. He looked nothing like the humans who had fought so fiercely in the battle, with his long, reptilian features and shimmering scales. His eyes were cold and calculating, but there was a hint of something else. Something new. "Captain Reynolds," the alien began, his voice smooth but laced with a forced calmness. "I must admit, your fleet has surprised us. We did not anticipate such a fierce response. We now understand that Earth is not to be underestimated." Reynolds's lips curved into a tight smile, though there was no warmth in it. "Glad to know that you're finally seeing the truth. It's a shame it took a battle to prove it." The alien paused, as if considering his words carefully. "We were wrong, Captain. Your species is not the primitive, naive race we once thought you to be. You are strong, and we were mistaken to believe we could intimidate you into submission." Reynolds's gaze never wavered. "You've learned a valuable lesson, but there's one thing you still don't understand. Humanity will never back down. You can threaten us, you can try to conquer us, but in the end, we fight for each other. We fight for our home. And we'll do whatever it takes to protect it." The alien's eyes flickered with something like recognition, but there was still a sense of calculated distance in his expression. "The war is far from over, Captain. You may have won this battle, but there are others who will not hesitate to test you again." "I'm counting on it," Reynolds replied, her voice firm. "You'll learn that when humanity says we're done, it's because we've decided to win, and we'll do whatever it takes." The screen went black, and Reynolds was left with the silence of space once more. There was no more laughter from the galaxy, no more dismissal. Humanity had proven its strength, and now the universe had no choice but to recognize it. Reynolds took a deep breath, her resolve strengthening. Earth had shown the galaxy what it was capable of. The enemy had struck first, thinking they could break humanity. But they had underestimated the one thing the galaxy could never replicate: the spirit of Earth's people. The battle was won, but the journey was far from over. As Reynolds looked out at the wreckage of the battlefield, she knew one thing for certain. Earth's fleet was ready for whatever came next, and this time, the galaxy would be the one to fear Earth's wrath.